pray these things in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Good morning. Merry Christmas. And such a blessing, a privilege to be able to just again gather together as the body of Christ and worship together and again celebrate His glory, His goodness, His mercy, His majesty. And this morning I realized that we will come to a conclusion of what we've been celebrating known as Advent. And looking at things like the presence, the peace, the hope, the joy. And today look at this, the depths of this display of love. See, there was a man who asked his wife if she'd ever loved someone before him. And she said to him very clearly, I admired a man once with his ability to, do business, create wealth. I mean, he was a wealthy man. And there was another man that I highly, admired. Because simply, he was brilliant, smarter than really anyone I'd ever met before. And then there was another man that, I really admired. Why? Because he was handsome. He was good looking. He had charisma for days, and his personality, amazing. But you, honey, there's really only one explanation, and that's love. Scratch that illustration off. Like, do you recognize that that's kind of the Christmas story, that there is no way to explain why God would send His Son into a broken, hurting, sorrow-filled world other than love. And when I think about Christmas and I think about what spotlights Christmas, for you, for me, it's an understanding of that love being on full display. And honestly, I can't think of a better verse. As we've looked at a varying array of verses over this Christmas season, that some would say, Korey, that doesn't sound like the manger and the star and the elements of Bethlehem. Like Korey, these haven't been Christmas verses. And I would say I beg to differ. Because I think one of the greatest Christmas verses that maybe many of you learned when you were a small child, a verse that's found in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him would not perish but have everlasting life. Do you realize that's celebrating Christmas? Celebrating the fact that God would send His Son in the form of a baby boy laid in a manger in Bethlehem, where shepherds and wise men would come and worship and give adoration and praise. And it's a reality that, clarifies the will of the Father, clarifies His character, it clarifies His love. How? Well, Jesus said clearly in John chapter 6 that I have not come to do my will, but I've come to do the will of the Father who sent me. He came to reveal the mission, the purpose that God had sent His Son to accomplish. And you might ask yourself, well, then what was the mission? What was His purpose in coming? And maybe your story, maybe your view of religion, maybe your view of this entity you call God is one that's full of wrath, anger, judgment, or condemnation. PK, I don't go to church because I don't need to be condemned any more than I already feel. Like, I'll go to work for that. Well, here's the problem. That would be an image of God that's a very poor interpretation of Scripture. Why? Because, see, John 3:16 doesn't stop with the idea that God sent his son, that there would be a reality of everlasting life, that he sent his only begotten son, that whosoever would believe would not perish but have eternal life. He goes on in verse 17 to say what? For I have not come into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Like he put on full display this story of love, that the reason condemnation didn't come with his story is because why? It had already happened. See, condemnation entered the picture when Adam and Eve in the garden chose to elevate themselves over relationship with God in order that they might be like God. And so when they took themselves and elevated themselves to this place that they thought would bring a new revelation, new life, what'd they find? Through the condemnation of their sin, they began to realize they weren't just naked physically, they became naked spiritually. And sin separates them in that moment from God the Father in a way that God now demonstrates his great love, that while they were in the sin in that moment and even now, he sent his son to show his great love for you and for me. Like, that's Christmas. See, Jesus' mission, his purpose wasn't to condemn the world. Why? Because it had already happened. But it's not like he came standing like a lifeguard on the side of a pool where people were desperately drowning in their sin, their sorrow, their hurt, their pain, and he stands there screaming, "Save yourself. Turn or burn." That's not what Jesus does. See, Christmas paints the beauty of this picture that Jesus dove into the sorrow. He dove into the humanity of your world and mine. He took on sin. He became Emmanuel, God with us. And he came not to just simply exist in the brokenness of this world. He came to save you from it. See, there's this old picture that the Marines actually taught in life-saving measures in deep water rescues. They don't teach it anymore. They don't teach it in lifeguard training, but they used to talk about the reality, the brutality of how when a lifeguard would enter the water with someone who is in panic, who is in fear for their own life, how they will use a lifeguard to pull them down and drown the very one that came to save them for the reality of trying to save themselves. And so what would they teach? They would teach a lifeguard how to throw a right hook in the water, to knock or daze the individual they've come to save so that they would become somewhat disoriented or even calm or unconscious in order for them to save them. See, here's the beauty of my rescuer. He didn't come to beat me unconscious. He came to demonstrate grace. He came to dwell in such a way that, well, he realized my panic. He realized my fear. And now they'll train a lifeguard to be able to actually go under the water and determine which way an individual in need of rescue, which way they're facing, so that he can come up behind them and take them from behind and then pull them to safety. The beauty of my rescuer is he didn't beat me into submission, and he doesn't pull me to safety. He offers me salvation. And now I have to ask an honest conversation. Do I want it? And see, in John 3:16, I love the fact that from the very beginning it points out one of three things I believe his love displays. His love shows that right out of the gate, it's universal. Why? For God so loved the world. The world. I began to use a phrase with my wife that I'll talk to her about my love. I'll say, honey, I love you, and there is nothing you can do about it. And the reason I began using that phrase with my wife is I believe that's the very phrase God used with me. Korey, Corey, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. My love doesn't come with condition. My love doesn't come by your performance. Corey, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And Paul captures this when he writes to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 5:19. In Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. And yet, remarkably, there are people today that still believe there are boundaries, there are limits on God's love. Like God can only love those who will love him back. Or that God only loves a select few, an elect few, or a chosen few. Here's the problem: that doesn't line up with the rest of the New Testament. And you say, well, wait a minute, PK, he does love those, but hear me. Why would he then teach his disciples to model his love for who? Not just love your neighbor, but love your enemies as I have loved you. Why? Because Jesus was trying to model his love was not just for those that would love him back. His love was for the world, for hurting, broken people that desperately needed to know salvation was at hand. The world. And God doesn't just love those that love him back. There's over 7 billion people in the world today. And I believe without question, if the world were to get in line and one by one go before the throne of the Father, he would utter the words, I love you. I love you. Why? Because no one's excluded from the love of God. Let me tell you why this is so incredible, especially for followers of Jesus to hear. See, in ancient cultures, you can go back and historically look at the realities of religion, the realities of world religions, and see that there was a God for everything. It was like old MacDonald, here a God, there a God, everywhere a God. Like they were gods over the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, living things, dying things. Like there was a God for everything, but yet in every single one of the religious stories of gods, Jesus Christ demonstrates something that no other world religion has ever captured. Love for the creation when the creation did not deserve it. That God pursued that which had turned its back on God. That in its panic and in its struggle, it had pushed God away, had pushed God out of the picture, and yet God demonstrated his love for us, that in while we were still sinners, Christ came and died for you and for me. And this word love, for God so loved, it's a beautiful word. It means unyielding. It means undeniable, unconditional love that Lamentations 3:22 captures. This steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. And Christmas celebrates this. Because God's love is not based on what you do, it's based on who he is. And his love is based on his character, not yours. It's based on his performance of sending a son into a manger, not your performance. And God loves hurting and broken people. Why? Because that's the only kind of people there are. Like if you're here today and you have a tendency to look at the people in front of you or beside you and think to yourself, maybe they've got it looking better than you do. Maybe they've got it more together than you do. Maybe they've figured things out more than you. Will you pause long enough to recognize Jesus' words when he said, there are none good, no, not one. Why? Because he is good. And in his character, he came to place that love, that goodness on full display at Christmas. But I also believe love that's sacrificial. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Now, anybody here use the word begotten in the last month or two? Like it's a word that you and I in our English vernacular, we don't use this word very often. And you might think, begotten, does that mean forgotten? Like no. It means distinctly unique. Absolutely unique, one of a kind. God's love is not just this talk, it's fact. And it was demonstrated fact by his son being born in a lonely stable, in a meager manger he was laid. And for those of you doing your Christmas bingo this morning, it would have wise men and shepherds thinking, holy pickles. And if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, you did not get a Christmas pack for the children's ministry this morning when you came in. But in this, he puts on full display this one-of-a-kind love. See, it's sacrificial in the same way that you and I recognize in marriage. I've been counseling folks in marriage for a really long time, and I realize that those so often that struggle the most in marriage are those that are unwilling to sacrifice the most. Why? See, when you get married, you are sacrificing things. You're sacrificing your singleness. You're sacrificing your time. You're sacrificing your energy. You're sacrificing so much. Why? So that the other person has their needs met too. And what it looks like for two people to enter into a relationship where they're willing to sacrifice in order to meet the other person's need, that's what God did in sending his son to say, listen, I know what your greatest need is, and I'm sending my son to be sacrificed to meet it. And what's that need? Forgiveness of sin. That sin that brought condemnation back in the garden that he said, listen, I have a plan for, and it's my love. In 1 John 4:10, it says, this is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. I came from heaven to do that which the Father has sent me to do. And what was that? To pay an atoning price on the death of a cross. To pay the price for sin. And he died to provide us the very thing we could get no other way. Forgiveness of sin. I don't know about you, but maybe your story this morning comes with maybe a muddied idea of religion, church. But I want you to see what the celebration of Christmas truly looks like. Hey, Gino, would you help me out this morning? Would you just stand right here for me? This is Gino. He's a cool kid. But Gino, can you say hi, everybody? There you go. Hey, Gino, would you look at me for a second? I just want you to do one thing. Without touching the stairs, without touching the platform, I want you to jump into my arms. Now, you can't touch anything over there. I just need you to jump into my arms. Oh, no, you can't touch the platform. Oh, man, hey, Gino, great try, buddy. But here's the thing, yeah, see? But I want to help someone here today. I want to help you in a pretty amazing way. You've been trying like that your whole life to find peace. You've been trying your whole life to find hope. You've been trying to find an answer to your loneliness. You've been trying to find an answer to your anger, your resentment, your bitterness. Like you have wrestled and you've toiled, and yet God said, hey, Gino, I'm going to leave my throne room, and I'm going to make a way to come into this world, and I'm going to send my son. And it says he blessed this world. That word blessed means that he actually not just came into this world to dwell with us. Scripture says he stooped down to us. And here's the thing. When he stooped down to you and me, he said, come here. I didn't just come down here to dwell with you. I came down here to bring you to a place you couldn't get on your own. This is what I see every week up here. Pretty crazy, isn't it? But see, God the Father, in sending his Son that celebrates Christmas, is his attempt to say, listen, I've loved you so much. I don't desire for you to stay where you are. I desire to give you a rescue to be with me, to be in relationship with me, to be in my presence, to be in a place where, well, be greater than yourself, to be in the presence of the King. That's what he did when he stepped into this world. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. And he did that because this love that he speaks of in John 3:16 was available. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes would not perish, but have everlasting life. I want you to hear a statement from me very clearly here today. And I don't want you to hear something I'm not saying, but I do want you to hear clearly what I am saying. While God loves all people unconditionally, he does not save all people unconditionally. While he loves people, he doesn't save all people. Why? Because Jesus said it clearly. God the Father saves everyone who believes in or trusts what? In God the Son. You cannot stop God from loving you, but you can stop God from saving you. How? By refusing wholeheartedly to push away the very gift he came to give you. To live in the panic and doubt and fear, all of the things you wrestle with, that you deal with each and every day, to allow those to become the center of your life and say to a God that I've come to rescue you, still say no. I don't want your rescue. I don't want your gift. Can I ask you a question? Husbands, wives, if tomorrow morning your husband or your wife were to give you a gift, and you were to see that gift, it's been, for the women, hear me, if your man tried to wrap it the best he could, and they put it in your lap, and you shoved it off and said, I don't want it. Do you think for a second your spouse might begin to question your love for them, for you? You don't want the gift I got you. You don't even want to unwrap and see what it is I brought to you. See, and our human tendency would be like, well, then fine. And God said, hey, you know what? You've pushed it away once, you've pushed it away twice, you've pushed it away 10 times, 50 times, 100 times, and I still love you. And I will still do everything I can to demonstrate that love for you so that you know I have not stopped loving you. Even in your question and your doubt, I will continue to pursue you. Why? Because I came into this world to save sinners, in which we are all one. And what's he saying? Forgiveness is available, but it's not automatic. Salvation is available, but it's not automatic. Heaven is available. Being in the presence of the King is available, but it's not automatic. God won't save you if you refuse his salvation work. And Gino, in his best attempt to get just a few feet off the ground, how futile our attempts to elevate ourselves, what they really look like. I can't get to God the Father on my own. So God made a way. That's what belief and faith and trust in Jesus looks like. Gino allowing me to just simply pick him up and walk to this very platform. And him saying, Korey, I trust you enough to carry me. Maybe today that's a step in your life that you've not taken, is just choosing to trust by faith the gift that's been offered to you at Christmas. When I was a kid, many of you know my story. I grew up in a home where my father was an evangelist. He was a pastor of a local church at different times. And there was a song we would sing in church growing up that I realized there was something that always caught my attention. And I don't know what your story looks like, but it always caught my attention that we would sing the same songs from the same hymnal over and over and over again. And it always floored me how many people could not sing the same song unless the hymnal was open to page 367, reading the same words over and over. Then I'm like, we've sang that like 1,000 times and you don't know the words. But there was a song that I began to wonder, shouldn't that be a Christmas song? I mean, it's the story of Christmas. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore. Heard it? Yeah. Very deeply stained with sin, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry, and from the water lifted me. Now safe am I. Love lifted me. Love lifted me when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. See, on that first Christmas, love lifted me. On that first Good Friday, when Jesus is beaten beyond recognition and his back is ripped to pieces by a cat of nine tails and his hands and feet are nailed to a cross, love lifted me. And 3 days later, when the sting of death would be overcome and the darkness of this world would be split in half by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, it was him saying, love lifted you through me. And when you wake up tomorrow morning and you recognize his presence, you can actually say, it's not presents that give me joy. It's not presents that give me life. It's the presence of the King who dwells in me, who lifted me to show me how deeply loved I am. That's Christmas. Like, that's the joy of it. It's why we can celebrate together and it not feel like a funeral. And I grew up in churches that just felt too much like a funeral way too often when we came to worship a king that says, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that should bring a joy this Christmas season. His name is Jesus. For the Father's will was to save his people from their sin. That's why we've celebrated peace, joy, hope, and today love. See, there's a center candle there. And we refer to it as the Christ candle. And it's at the center of these candles. Why? Because we realize that you and I can never understand joy or peace or hope or love. Not real love, not real peace, not real joy, not real hope without Jesus Christ. And maybe this morning, if you ask yourself if love or joy, peace or hope, if they're really evident in your life, and you're struggling to answer that question, maybe, just maybe, Christ has never found himself at the center of your life for you to experience the joy he brings, the hope he brings, the love he brings. It's why we celebrate today by lighting a Christ candle. And in just a moment, as I call those that we've asked this morning to be candle lighters, I'm going to ask you if you would to step out and be aware of the steps that are here in the front. But I want you to visibly see again this morning what it looks like for this light that stepped into darkness so that you and I could understand the true light of life. What it looks like in this place when the light of Christ begins to, well, change the environment, change the world. And that light comes alive. So this morning, if you're joining us in lighting candles, I invite you here to the front. And as I light one, they'll come and light one, and you'll pass it along to the person beside you. And as we light these candles, we're going to invite you, if you would, to simply join with us as we reflect on a silent night that changed the world. Would you stand with us and sing Silent Night one more time? There's an announcement that I need to make. It's a big one. I know many of you that are here with us today, well, maybe today's a first day for you, or maybe today is a day you're trying to figure out what church looks like, but I need to give you an announcement. And it's an announcement that I believe will impact a number of families that are here today. And that announcement is simply this. In 2024, we're going to do this every Sunday morning at 9 and 11 as we worship together. So for those of you that maybe today's the first day you've been here since Easter, we're going to do it outside of Easter and Christmas and worship every Sunday morning in 2024 at 9 and 11. And we'd love to invite you to be a part of the body and the expression of worship. And today as you leave, you get another opportunity to, express fellowship as you partake in the chocolate bar, the hot chocolate bar, and have a scavenger hunt for family and children, like just an opportunity for you to continue in fellowship. And because it's Sunday, something I say each and every week, guests, we're grateful you're here, but we are not interested in your money. But if you call this home and you came today to bring a sacrifice of praise, you came today to worship even in your giving, we've got boxes in the back, the blue boxes, the wooden boxes, and you're still able today to leave that gift. And tomorrow as you join together as a family, would you hear us clearly today? From myself and all those here at River Oak Grace, may you have a very Merry Christmas.